All right, so this is the time where I am actually reading the two articles. So that's all I'm gonna do. All I'm gonna do is read these two articles. So let's get started. All right, so first, contemporary agricultural trends. Trend one: how America's food giants swallowed the family farms, excerpted from The Guardian. When the vast expanse of rural Iowa was carved up for settlers in the 19th century, it was often divided into 160-acre lots. Four farms made a square mile, with a crisscross of dead straight roads marking the boundaries like a sprawling chessboard. Within each square, generations of families tended pigs and cattle, grew oats, and raised children, with the sons most likely to take over the farm. That is how Barb Kalbuck saw the future when she left her family's land to marry and begin farming with her new husband, Jim, 47 years ago. When we were very first when we very first were married, we had cattle and calves, she said. We raised hogs from farrow to finish, and we had corn, beans, hay, and oats. So did everyone around us. Half a century later, Kalbach surveys the destruction within the section of chessboard she shared with other farms near Dexter in southwestern Iowa. Barb and Jim are the last family still working the land after their neighbors were picked off by waves of collapsing commodity prices and the rise of factory farming. With that came a vast transfer in wealth as farm profits funneled into corporations or the diminishing number of families that own an increasing share of the land. Rural communities have been hollowed out. Stop and jot. What caused the vast transfer of wealth from small farmers to corporations? And while the callbacks have hung on to their farm, they long ago abandoned livestock and mixed arable farming for the only thing they could make money at anymore. Growing corn and soybeans to sell to corporate buyers as feed for animals crammed by the thousands into the huge semi-automated sheds that now dominate farming and the landscape in large parts of Iowa. Stop and jot. Summarize the article in 5 to 7 sentences. Use at least five vocabulary words in your summary. Trend two: why small local organic farms aren't the key to fixing our food system. By Tamar Haspel, The Washington Post. The food movement has a problem. It's right about what's wrong with our system, but wrong about how to fix it. But what is the food movement? I hear you asking. For these purposes, we'll call it the loose coalition of sustainability minded people calling for the food system to be more focused on environmental and human health. There are lots of players with lots of agendas, but the key issues boil down to a familiar few. We have a chemical intensive system with crowds out biodiversity, depletes the soil, and pollutes the water to grow corn and soy for cheap meat and processed food, which make us fat and sick. While we can talk about the extent to which these things are true, and I have, in eye glazing patience trying detail, it's hard to look at the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico or the inexorable rise in obesity and deny that they're problems. How do we fix it? You've seen the bumper stickers: buy fresh, buy local, support the small, diverse, organic or organic ish farm that supplies the farmers market and local restaurants with fresh vegetables. And that's a great idea. Local agriculture brings a host of benefits, from delicious strawberries to a much needed reminder that food has to come from somewhere. Stop and jot. What are the two ways to fix food? We need we need to feed a growing planet. Vegetables aren't the answer, but it cannot fix that chemical intensive system that crowds out biodiversity, depletes the soil, pollutes the water, etc. And that's not a lack of confidence in or enthusiasm for that kind of small farm. It's simply a recognition that there are economic, logistic, topographical, and even arithmetic reasons that those farms can only be a small slice of a reimagined, responsible food system. There are at least four reasons. They don't grow the right stuff. The crops these farms grow are fruits and vegetables. And even if we all eat a produce rich diet, fruits and vegetables cannot be more than a sliver of our agricultural system. The United States has about 400 million acres of cropland and only about 4% of its fruits and vegetables, with the USDA what the USDA calls specialty crops. I know I'm repeating myself here, but if we all ate the recommended servings of produce, we might double that acreage. However, there is no realistic scenario under which produce is more than 10% of cropland, and 10% cannot be the solution. Stop and jot. What foods do we need to eat more of? They can't grow the right stuff. The reason small, local, diverse farms grow vegetables and sometimes livestock is that those are high margin products. Carpet, the crops that carpet the vast swaths of the Midwest cannot be successfully grown small and local because you need economies of scale to make those crops profitable. What's great about staple crops such as oats, lentils, barley, and yes, corn and soy is that they produce huge amounts of nutritious, affordable food per acre. Of course, when you turn them into processed foods and ethanol and animal feed, you lose some of those advantages. It's hard to grow grains and uh, I've never been able to pronounce this word. l- Legumes at small scale because you would have to charge way too much for them to keep your farm afloat. And one of the chief virtues of those crops is that they're affordable. Stop and jot. Why can't they grow the right stuff? The land is in the wrong place. Look at the chart where the cropland is and where the people are. They don't match. Take the Northeast from Maine to the district. The district means Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. It's got 3% of cropland, but 20% of the population. By contrast, the northern plains, the Dakotas, meaning North and South Dakota, Kansas, and Nebraska, have 24% of the land, but 2% of the population. It's not just that the land is inequitably distributed. There's an inherent problem in trying to grow food near the people who eat it. The more concentrated the population center is, the more expensive the land tends to be. Even if large tracts were available for growing food, they would often be prohibitively expensive. Stop and jot. Why is the land in the wrong place? Seasons. In most parts of the country, local food is available only for a limited season. This is not just a problem with an image of American agriculture as a patchwork of small local farms. It's one of the key reasons that the crops grown on the large farms, the grains, and the legumes are, as they always have been, the backbone of the human diet. They are storable. Harvest in September, eat in June, or the next June, or even the one after that. One big reason some foods cost so much more than others. Even though the lion's share of agricultural's impact on human and environmental health comes from the industrialized portion of our food supply, the fix isn't to replace industrialized with non-industrialized or corn with broccoli. The fix is to focus on the grains and the legumes that are staple crops, grow them better, and incorporate them whole into our diet. Right now, virtually the only label out there for better industrialized is organic. In some ways, organic agriculture has an environmental edge over conventional, but the standard was developed to conform to an idea of naturalness, not to minimize industrial impact. And so, while organic farms tend to have healthier soil and to lock away more carbon in the soil, conventional systems have higher yields and can more easily reduce the need to disturb the oil by tilling, which can help soil retain water and reduce runoff. Since runoff is one of the primary problems, it's responsible both for degrading soil health and for water quality problems like the huge dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. That's an important advantage. Stop and jot. What is an impact of the organic movement? If local and organic are only a limited part of the solution, what does a broader image of a responsible food supply look like? I asked Tom Griffin, director of the Agriculture, Food, and Environment program at Tufts University Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. And he wrote in an email, having a food system that has multiple scales is better than having a preponderance of one scale, either large or small. The growing of grains and legumes isn't inherently less sustainable than growing produce, he says, but he would like to see a system where farms can take advantage of economies of scale without producing a homogeneous landscape. In general, the experts I talked to about this have a view of sustainability that encompasses all sizes and all crops, with local and organic playing an important but necessary small role. Stop and jot. What is an impact of the Grow Local movement? While your humble bowl of oatmeal could help feed a growing planet. How? It's time to change the focus. Local and organic are mission accomplished. Awareness is widespread. Continuing to push those two things will further entrench the idea that they're the only solution, and that idea is the enemy of real improvement. Move on to where a change in farming can make a much bigger difference, the hundreds of millions of acres of commodity crops. I talk to a lot of farmers of those crops who are making environmental impact a top priority and implementing practices to improve their soil health, reduce nutrient runoff, and retain water. We have to start thinking about how consumers can use their buying power to support those farmers. It's a tall order, in part because it means involving the large companies that both supply and buy from those farmers. And many of those companies have been tagged as the enemies of environmental and public health. But the first step has to be the acknowledgement. Say it out loud that local and organic can't solve the problem. Stop and jot. If small and organic farms aren't the answer, then what is the answer? The food movement has been instrumental in educating consumers about the problems of our system. It's time to focus on fixing them. Stop and jot. Summarize this article in 5 to 7 sentences. Use at least 5 vocabulary words in your summary. Okay, so I am done with the reading. Hopefully that was helpful. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. You have my email address. Good luck.